It's Lucinda.
Hi, Lucinda. Hi, Faith. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. I feel
Good.
blessed.
I was muted.
I said I feel so blessed to be here with all of you today.
Thank you for the invite.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.
We have camera off because I'm here. Can you see us? This is Michael and I.
Hi, Michael.
It's only 8 o'clock in California, and we're still in jammies, and we're still in bed in our little robes, and we're just hanging out here. So,
Friends, we are live on Facebook now.
okay, I'm stopping video. Bye bye.
Faith, you even drew Dennis out. Look at there. Hi, Dennis.
People here, not only from the greater Atlanta area, but we also have people from Portland and California and Ohio and Florida and Texas and North Carolina. So Nashville, we've got quite
all right
here.
So we're going to have to get going, everyone. We're already live broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook. So allow pa, dear friends. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program sponsored by the Spiritual Assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb County and Sandy Springs, Georgia. It's wonderful to have all of you here with us today. Across the globe, the teachings of the Baha'i faith, brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, whose name in Arabic means the glory of God, have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity, and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image God made us in, the integration of worship and service, with work performed in the spirit of service actually being counted as worship in the eyes of God, the fundamental equality of the sexes, more widely evidenced in a setting of equal opportunity, the harmony between religion and science as an established fact, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Again, welcome. We're pleased to have all of you join us. We'll begin with opening devotions. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking, and silence your electronic devices if you are speaking. Thank you. Gwen?
Say, God suffices all things above all things, and nothing in the heavens or the earth but God suffices. Verily, He is in Himself the knower, the sustainer, the omnipotent. His holiness the Baha'i.
Elizabeth?
O my God, my Lord and my Master, I have detached myself from my kindred and have sought through Thee to become independent of all that dwell on earth, and ever ready to receive that which is praiseworthy in Thy sight. Bestow on me such good as will make me independent of aught else but Thee, and grant me an ampler share of Thy boundless favors. Verily, thou art the Lord of grace abounding. The Bob.
Kathy,
My God, my adored one, my King, my desire. What tongue can voice my thanks to thee? I was heedless, thou didst awaken me. I had turned back from thee, thou didst graciously aid me to turn towards thee. I was as one dead. Thou didst quicken me with the water of life. I was withered. Thou didst revive me with the heavenly stream of thine utterance, which hath flowed forth from the pen of the All-Merciful. O divine providence, all existence is begotten by thy bounty. Deprive it not of the waters of thy generosity. Neither do thou withhold it from the ocean of thy mercy. I beseech thee to aid and assist me at all times and under all conditions, and seek from the heaven of thy grace thine ancient favor. Thou art in truth the Lord of bounty and the sovereign of the kingdom of eternity. Baha'u'llah.
Yasmin, then Boyd,
He is God. Thou seest us, O my God, gathered around this table, praising thy bounty, with our gaze set upon thy kingdom. O Lord, send down upon us thy heavenly food and confer upon us thy blessing. Thou art verily the bestower, the pitiful, the compassionate. Abdu'l-Baha.
Rashida,
O Lord my God, assist thy loved ones to be firm in thy faith, to walk in thy ways, to be steadfast in thy cause. Give them thy grace to withstand the onslaught of self and passion, to follow the light of divine guidance. Thou art the powerful, the gracious, the self-subsistent, the bestower, the compassionate, the almighty, the all-bountiful. Abdu'l-Baha.
Stephanie,
It is better to guide one soul than to possess all that is on earth. For as long as that guided soul is under the shadow of the tree of divine unity, he and the one who hath guided him will both be recipients of God's tender mercy, whereas possession of earthly things will cease at the time of death. The path to guidance is one of love and compassion, not of force and coercion. This hath been God's method in the past and shall continue to be in the future. He causeth him whom he pleaseth to enter the shadow of his mercy. Verily, he is the supreme protector, the all-generous. There is no paradise more wondrous for any soul than to be exposed to God's manifestation in his day, to hear his verses and believe in them, to attain his presence, which is not but the presence of God, to sail upon the sea of the heavenly kingdom of his good pleasure, and to partake of the choice fruits of the paradise of his divine oneness. The Bab.
Karen,
This is the day in which the testimony of the Lord hath been fulfilled, the day in which the word of God hath been made manifest, and his evidence firmly established. His voice is calling you unto that which shall profit you, and enjoineth you to observe that which shall draw you nigh unto God, the Lord of revelation, Baha'u'llah.
Lynn.
The whole human race is submerged in the sea of the mercy of the Lord, and we are all the sheep of one divine shepherd. Whatever shortcomings exist among us must be remedied. For example, those who are ignorant must be educated so that they may become wise. The sick must be treated until they recover. Those who are immature must be trained in order to reach maturity. Those asleep must be awakened. All this must be accomplished through love and not through hatred and hostility. Abdul Baha.
Justice is not limited. It is a universal quality. Its operation must be carried out in all classes, from the highest to the lowest. Justice must be sacred, and the rights of all the people must be considered. Desire for others that which you desire for yourselves. Then shall we rejoice in the sun of justice, which shines from the horizon of God. Thank you to everyone who read today. Next, we're going to have a healing prayer. If any of you wish to remember a loved one for this prayer of healing, please feel free to call out their name at this time.
Elon Bowers.
Edie Charles.
Barb Gutterman.
Joel Smith.
Connie and Max.
My cousin Stephanie.
Betsy Bond.
Adam.
Alicia Alexander.
Alex.
Anastasia.
Neville's.
Barbara.
Mary Eden.
Tempest Chambers.
Stepmom Jane.
The whole earth.
U.S.
Shiraz Beamer.
Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God. And remembrance of thee is my remedy. Nearness to thee is my hope. Is my hope. And love for thee is my companion. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing. Oh my God. Oh my God. Thy mercy to me is
And now we're blessed to have a musical performance.
Through the portals of this home, we'll go out with a gladsome heart. My home is the home of peace. My home is the home of joy and delight. My home is the home of laughter and exaltation. Whosoever enters through the portals of this home will go out with a gladsome heart. My home is the home of peace. My home is the home of joy and delight. My home is the home of laughter and exaltation. This is the home of light. This is the home of light. This is the home of light.
Friends, each week we are blessed to have a guest speaker share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week, we're honored to have with us 3 special guests, Faith Holmes, Arya Badian, and Laura Catches. So, one moment. Faith Holmes has embarked on a journey exploring the intersection of science and spirituality. She has always been greatly fascinated by the teachings of the Baha'i faith around how we create our reality with our thoughts. Upon discovering the works of Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, Trevor Mawad, and Bruce Lipton, her life took on a new path. She was finally able to connect a major tenet of the Baha'i faith, the harmony of science and religion, with scientific research. Holmes has been offering lectures and coaching around meditation, mindfulness, living a life of coherence, and looking at how we are creators of our reality and not the victims of our circumstances. She is currently in the process of becoming a corporate trainer through NeuroChange Solutions to help individuals and organizations change from the inside out. Our second presenter today, Arya Badian, is a multidisciplinary conceptual artist. Her body of work explores American values in light of a 400-year-old history that falls short of upholding them. Arya juxtaposes text and image, embedding the conceptual narrative within the work. The purpose of this work is to facilitate healing from the diseases of racism, sexism, and American exceptionalism. Each piece cuts through oppositional consensus narratives, laying bare the truth, inviting reconciliation of the wrongs that stain our country's past and present. And last but certainly not least, Laura Catches is a Lakota mother of 3 beautiful children, member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, and is currently the director of Lakota Studies Department for the Oglala Sioux County School District. Laura has dedicated her life to Lakota language activism and helping her people remember the richness of the Lakota language and culture. Friends, please welcome all of our speakers today. It looks like it's going to be a wonderful talk. I'll pass it over to you, Faith.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take just a moment for each of us to introduce ourselves and share with you why it is that we felt the importance and need to talk about historical trauma and healing and what that has to do with America's spiritual destiny. I want to take a moment to thank you for the beautiful devotions and prayers this morning. Quotes 10 and 11 really get to the heart of the matter of what it is we are here to talk about today. So not all the quotes really did, but especially quotes 10 and 11. I also want to thank my brothers, J.B. Eckel and Eric Dozier for that beautiful, and my niece Bella for that beautiful healing prayer that we opened with today, because that's really truly the work that we're doing. I want to honor my mother who's here today, Cindy Catches. The three of us would not be here giving this presentation if it were not for her and her husband, Peter Catches. Peter is behind me in this beautiful portrait. He is a 38th generation Lakota medicine man and leader of his people, and Laura is his granddaughter. And Aria painted this incredible portrait. Sadly, we lost Peter 3 years ago, and but we still feel him with us all the time in spirit. So I do this work because I know that the destiny of America is great, and the spiritual bounties that we can receive are there to be had if we all stand up and do our work and not come together in this country, in this world, if we do not do the work of healing. And we have to understand where we come from to do that work. So I'm Faith, and I'm so honored to be with each of you today. I'm going to hand it off to Aria.
Thank you, Faith. It's really an honor to be here, especially sharing the stage with Laura, who is a giant. I'm almost embarrassed to be here with her, but I am very honored to be here. You know, a little bit about my background. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm an artist. I'm also an entrepreneur. I was born in America, but I lived in 6 different countries and spent a lot of my life living outside of this country. And I've gone through my own love-hate relationship with my nation. I had, you know, the ability to see it through other eyes in other countries, and also, you know, get an education that was different than what I was brought up on when I was a child. And so I started to see a lot of the, you know, a lot of the dark side of this country, and for a while really rejected being an American. I was embarrassed about being an American. I didn't want to identify that way. And it's come full circle. I now really love my country. I love the ideals that this country was built upon. And as a Baha'i, we have a prophecy that this country will lead all nations spiritually. And as I've wrestled with, you know, how can I look at our dark and checkered past and at the same time believe in that kind of future, I've asked myself, well, what would it take really to get there? And my art tries to answer that question of, you know, let's embrace those lofty ideals. What would it take for me to feel proud of being an American? And that has to do with reconciling with, you know, the horrors of our past and healing from them. And I see art as a way to bring that kind of medicine. Laura.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here with you all, and it's good to see a lot of familiar faces as well as all the new faces. My name is Laura Catches. I am a member of the Oglala Lakota Nation, Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Let me see, I do this work. This work is so important to me because I know once I started studying my culture and I started studying myself, after growing up in the city and the reservation, I felt like I was growing up in 2 worlds. So just having the best of both worlds, as well as, now I can say that it was the best of both worlds after I began the healing, and I can thank the hardships. But I know ultimately the aim of Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota life is to obey kinship and to be a good relative, and to maintain those relationships. And it's our relationships with everything. And with the historical trauma, those relationships were broken. So I really feel like this work and continuing to heal myself and, maintaining relationships, not only with my family, but with the world, is going to help bring, some peace and some understanding with all of us. Thank you.
Laura, before we get started, would you be willing to offer a prayer and then we'll get started on the slideshow?
Sure. Okay. Okay. Tunkashala wakatanka hi hani ki le betu washteshte wanji iwachi unyampi. Hechel daku washteshte echela unkaki papikte. Onshi unlapi na o unkiape mitakuye oyasi. Pilamayaya. I just said, let us have a good morning and a good day and have pity on us and help us. And just, we are all related.
Thank you so much. So we are going to be talking today, as we mentioned, about historical trauma and healing and arising to achieve America's spiritual destiny. There's a quote from Baha'u'llah that says, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. We do this work, all three of us, because we know that the unity of mankind is what is most important and the healing of its peoples. For some reason, we're going to talk about the mid-1800s forward. There's a ton of history that could be covered, but really for this time period, it's interesting because what happened to the Lakota Nation, what happened here in this country around the ending of slavery, and the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith coming, all happened in the mid-1800s. So we're going to focus on this time period going forward. And in 1859, Baha'u'llah, the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith, wrote, "O son of spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice." He also wrote, "The light of men is justice. Quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men." It's very interesting to take a look at this quote because often what we hear in America is that we need unity, we need to come together, but we don't often talk about how justice plays into that. So the conversation that we want to have today has to do with the history that we come from, understanding the historical trauma that has happened, and then what is the path to healing. So to do that, I don't believe that we can come to justice without truly understanding the history of America. And most of us were very miseducated. I think Aria spoke a little bit about that in her introduction. You know, me going to school, growing up in a little beach town of South Florida, I learned very little about indigenous cultures of this land. The only thing that I really learned was around Thanksgiving. And that was the glorification of the white man coming together with the indigenous community and what they taught them, but had nothing to do with the last 150 years of the traumas that took place. I'm not sure why my screen is going backwards. Sorry about that. You know, one of the things that we hear of indigenous peoples is the need for us as the white man to civilize a nation. And I think what we did was some of the greatest atrocities that exist in the world. So I want to talk about Crazy Horse, which was one of the great Lakota leaders who was killed in 1877. And I want you to see what the core of this beautiful people was then and is still now. This quote from Crazy Horse: "Upon suffering, beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world. A world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations. A world longing for light again. I see a time of 7 generations when all the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle again. In that day, there will be those among the Lakota who will carry knowledge and understanding of unity among all living things. And the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. I salute the light within your eyes, where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at that center within you, and I am at that place within me, we shall be as one." This quote to me is incredibly significant because I feel like Crazy Horse might be with us and assisting us today when he says, there will be those among the Lakota who will carry knowledge and understanding. That's Laura. And, you know, when he says that the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for their wisdom, that's what we are here doing. And I think that, you know, it says here, talking about the 7 generations, Sitting Bull sent out talking sticks in the mid 1800s and said that, you know, 7 generations from now, the people will come back together. There's this prophecy, and they count, you know, grandparent to grandchild as a generation. And we are that 7th generation at this time living. So we have a great destiny that we can fulfill if we do the work. Lakota means people of peace. If you look it up in the dictionary, it will say allies or friends. However, if you ask my and Laura's grandfather, Pete, he would say that it means people of peace. And, you know, in the mid 1800s, there was a migration west of settlement in this nation. And the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people were greatly impacted by this. And I think one of the best representations of this would be one of the artwork pieces that Aria has created. So I would like for her to speak to this and her artwork.
Thank you, Faith. This piece is called Hindsight is 2020. And I did this to document the broken treaties of the white man and illustrating how this land was stolen from Native peoples. In the Treaty of Fort Laramie in 1851, on the left-hand side, you can see the outline of the legally signed treaty, which in and of itself is problematic, but let's just, as Faith said, we're going to have a starting point. So let's make this our starting point and assume that the Lakota Nation came to an agreement with the US government. In the background of this are the words from the treaty. This is one of 368 treaties that the United States signed with Native nations, and all of them were broken. As you can see, the Lakota Nation formed a large part of the Midwest and granted in the treaty in perpetuity were the Black Hills, which are sacred, very sacred land to the Lakota. And if you ever have the opportunity and privilege to go there, as soon as you step foot on it, you will know what that is. You can feel it. It's very palpable, and over time, you can see how that land and those treaties were violated and stolen. And to this day, the United States is occupying stolen lands, and you know, in many ways, the monument of Mount Rushmore, which is a carving of 4 U.S. presidents, is a desecration of that sacred land. And so this is a national crime scene that we need to come to terms with. And it's one of those things where, you know, as we grow up as a country, we're a young nation, we have to come to terms with, you know, with the stains of our past and make them right. And so you can see in this series at the very end, you know, at the beginning, it's hard to read on this slide, but it says the territory, and then it marks all that territory. And by 2020, all that is left is the terror. But we have the opportunity to begin a process of healing that and reconciling that.
I just want to thank you, Aria, for this artwork, because it is so important for not only the nation to realize this, but even for our own people to realize this. So this is an excellent, excellent art piece that just, you know, says so many things without speaking. And that was one of the things of Lakota people, was that the less you say, and so it makes what you do have to say a lot more powerful. So I really feel like this is such an important, you know, piece of artwork for everyone to understand. And I just want to thank you for this, because, you know, this is a start of that, acknowledging the true history, so that we can begin our healing with each other, you know. And I know in today, in the 21st century, what does that look like? You know, what does that healing look like? How can we help fix this? You know, so I feel like this artwork is just so amazing to me. So I just want to thank you so much for it.
Aria, will you also talk about Manifest Destiny?
Sure. You mean the concept?
Well,
or the piece?
The painting.
Okay. Yeah. Behind Faith is a portrait that I did of Zinkala Oyate, 38 generation Lakota medicine man. And if you think about that legacy and the ancestors, you know, in Lakota, I know Laura will talk about this, but she said it in her prayer, Mitakwe Oyasin, we are all related. So we are all a family, we are all relatives, and our relatives, our ancestors, are the people of this land, of this nation. And I don't know if it's visible through Faith's screen. I think maybe you have to talk again, Faith, so that you come center.
Okay. There you are.
And in the background, I have, you know, contrasted his portrait where he is in his ceremonial garb, and he and his ancestors, particularly his father, grandfather, going back 38 generations, were the spiritual leaders of their people. And this, you know, for those Americans that feel very proud of this country and are, you know, patriotic, that the phrase "making America great again" is something that resonates. There's this notion that there's something great in our past that we want to come back to. Well, that's been used as a weapon. And so, part of what I see, art can do is create a bridge. So if we invite that concept, what would it take to make America great again? And there is a way to look back at our checkered past and find something there that will make America great again. And that is by turning to our ancestors, the First Nations people across the Americas, and bringing that teaching forward as Faith read in Crazy Horse, his call out to this country.
Thank you so much. I also want to talk a little more about what Aria and Laura discussed about this art piece, and you can see the lands in 1851 and what happened in 1868. And in the 1870s, in the 1868 treaty, it was written in that the Black Hills would belong to the Lakota people as long as the grass grew. And in the 1870s, the white man found gold in the Black Hills and took the Black Hills back. And in the last 20 or 30 years, the Lakota Nation has sued the United States government to get back their lands. As Aria mentioned, they're still occupying stolen lands. And the United States government said, you're absolutely correct. We are sorry. It was not okay for us to take your lands. Here's a settlement of money. And the Lakota Nation said, the Black Hills are not for sale. This is our sacred land. And that money has been sitting in a trust-bearing account for all these years. And in 2015, that money was worth $1.2 billion. And there is, if you look, the Lakota people have said that the Black Hills is the heart of our people. It is the heart of the nation. And interestingly, they've said this for hundreds of years. And interestingly, now we can see a shot of the Black Hills from outer space, and it is shaped just like a human heart. Laura, would you like to speak to that at all?
No, I just feel that, it is just so amazing that shot from outer space is the shape of a human heart. You see it. I feel like, those are words, but when you actually go to the Black Hills and you see and feel the power of it, then you'll understand why that, the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota people just knew that there was no amount of money that would be able to pay for such an amazing place that has, so much history. And I guess I just want to say, not only did they take the Black Hills back, that's whenever they forced the people onto reservations. So these are the reservations that we live on around the Black Hills, but we still go to the Black Hills for prayer, for ceremonies. And because this was the land that we lived on, and we, used the buffalo for everything, we followed the buffalo around the Black Hills. And that's another reason why they're not for sale, because of the 7 sacred sites that are around the Black Hills that we go to pray, throughout the entire year, to keep us going, for resiliency, to have a good life, to keep those relationships, not only with each other, but with the land. So that is a huge reason why the Black Hills are not for sale.
And finally, and there's so much more history here. There's so much deeper things that really need to be covered. And, I hope that you will take time to educate yourselves on the importance of our history and really truly getting a viewpoint of our true history. But, one of the things that took place with reservations throughout the country is residential schools, is boarding schools. And there was a movement that you can Google very easily and learn a lot about. And it was Kill the Indian, Save the Man. And this was something actually that the United States government signed off on, promoted, perpetrated. This is something that is a crime against humanity. And Laura's father was one of those men in a residential school. My other father, Peter, was also the product of a residential school. And these were boarding schools here in Pine Ridge. It was the Catholic Church. And the crimes that they committed against these beautiful souls is really beyond words. I've heard Peter tell a story of him being 4 years old and being excited to go to school. And his family was very poor. And he put on his sister's clothes to go to school. And he got on the bus and he gets there and he has beautiful long hair. And the nuns put him in line with all the little girls. And he gets out of the line with the little girls and goes and gets in line with the boys. And one of the nuns snatches him out of the line and puts him in line with the little girls again. And the only language he speaks is Lakota. And when she's not looking, he goes back and gets in line with the little boys. And again, she angrily snatches him out and puts him in line with the little girls. And once again, when she's not looking, he goes back. And this time she's so angry, and somehow he communicates with her something that he's not a girl. And she takes him into another room and takes his skirt down and sees that he's a little boy and beats him. His mouth was washed out with soap every time he spoke his native tongue. His hair was cut. He only lived a few miles from the school, and yet he only spent 2 months in the summer at home with his family. This notion of kill the Indian, save the man is not so far in our history. The effects of it are still with us today. I heard a story shared about speaking one Lakota word with a family member recently, and he says that the nun brought him in front of the whole class and had him stick his tongue out like this, and she took one of those 12-inch rulers and slapped it, and he was bleeding underneath his tongue. Another family member shared this week a story of, those paddle balls games that kids play where you hold this paddle in your hand and then there's a string and a ball attached to it and you hit the ball over and over and over again. Well, when she spoke her native tongue, the nuns would make her put her hands out and they'd beat her hands and the back of her calves. These are the things that happened to this beautiful nation. And the terror that still impacts this reservation today is a crime against humanity. And we have to know this history, because if we want to truly come together as a nation, we need to understand the historical trauma that not only has taken place in the past, but is still taking place today. My mother moved to this reservation 30 years ago, and she came from a very affluent community in South Florida. And she thought her resume, she could get a job anywhere. And there are no jobs to be had here on the res, or very few, and was not able to get a job and lived on commodities for almost 10 years. They would provide 6 or 7 actually, cans of vegetables for a month for 2 people. Their meat came packaged in fat and oil. President Clinton came to this land in, I believe it was 92, and had the Surgeon General do a overview to look at what was happening here in Pine Ridge. And the Surgeon General told him that it was a genocide that was taking place. And finally, they started getting fruits and vegetables and things like that that were not commodities, or at least were not canned. There were still commodities, but better presentations, or not presentations, but better quality. So these are some of the underlying factors that are still impacting our community here today. And we need to understand the historical trauma and the trauma that is still taking place. I want to go ahead and ask if there is, before I move on, if there's anything else that Laura or Aria would like to share regarding this issue, these issues. Are you both complete?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we are going to move on and take a look at what has happened regarding the history of the African American community since the mid-1800s as well. You can see, we all know about the 13th Amendment and the ending of slavery. And it's very interesting because if you haven't had a chance to see the documentary 13th, it's an important one to see. But you know, the 13th Amendment of the US Constitution aimed to abolish slavery. But in reality, the amendment allowed slavery to remain legal. And Section 1 of the amendment reads, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So one of the things that happened at the ending of slavery was the continued terror, violence of white supremacy, the Reconstruction era where people were not safe, the migration of African Americans from the southern states where slavery was into northern cities. However, they still weren't welcomed there. We had, you know, in the late 1890s, we had the US Night Riders who went out and burned the homes of African Americans who bought their own land. There was always a community of people who went to make sure that the African American community who did get ahead would not be able to prosper. We then went into Jim Crow segregation, and where people were not, you know, we had separate drinking fountains, we had separate, you know, bathrooms, we had people could not buy food at restaurants, would have to come in through the kitchen or the back door to get stuff to go. Like, we had all of these things. You know, by a show of hands, who here is really familiar with what took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921? You know, there's only a few people that usually know a little bit about that. But here we had, because of segregation, we had a community of people who were thriving. We had people who had, African Americans had their own storefronts, had their own banks, had their own restaurants, barbershops, all of these amazing things. And white men took it amongst themselves to come in and burn down the town. But that isn't all that happened. At that time, there were bombs that were dropped from the air. Do we believe that anyone other than the United States government had access to planes in the 1920s? like the systematic suppression, oppression, and terror that has happened throughout the last 150 years, 170 years has been great. And the trauma has never stopped. You know, we then go into separate but equal, and we look at factory jobs, and we had factories that in the northern cities, a lot of them took place in downtown major cities, but then they moved out to the suburbs. And African Americans were not able to buy homes or even rent places in the suburbs so that they could work at those factory jobs. It was another way of taking jobs away from African Americans. There's a story I heard recently in the Chicago area of a man who rented, he had an apartment building, and a factory had moved out to the western suburbs of Chicago. And this man rented to an African American family to work in that factory. And the white men in that town burned the man's building down so that African Americans would know that they were not welcome in that town. Real estate agents would lose their license if they rented to African Americans or sold houses to African Americans, and banks wouldn't allow them to receive loans because of redlining. So there were all of these things that happened. Let's think about the GI Bill. Every person who is on this call probably has some experience with generational wealth. And most of us receive generational wealth because our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents were able to buy homes. And those homes kept gaining them financial wherewithal. The GI Bill after World War II, everyone who came home from World War II who fought was supposed to be a part of the GI Bill where they could go in and buy homes, and the United States government would back up that loan so that they could buy a piece of property. Only 2% of African Americans, not even, I think it was 0.2% if I remember correctly, were able to take part in that GI Bill because of redlining and because of people making it illegal to sell to African Americans. And the trauma continues today. We still see the abuse of policing in this country. Do people even know that policing came out of historical trauma and slavery? And after George Floyd was murdered, Aria was really moved, and she created a number of art pieces. And I would like for her to speak a little bit to those things.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you for telling the truth about our history that sadly still our children are not learning. I had the ability to homeschool my children through grade school, and sadly it was hard to find curriculum that really presented the history of our nation from the lens of truthfulness. This piece is called Liberty Enlightening the World, and it is a testament to that history. The words that are enshrined in our Constitution, we the people, that have been historically excluded, and the embodiment of liberty here is shown as a beautiful Black woman who will lead us forward, lead our nation forward into the true liberty that we cherish in our American values. And here she is standing before a crowd that is symbolic of the millions and millions of Black lives that have been lost, taken on this nation, those that built this country. They were on their backs, this entire country and economy was built. And they have been lost to us, but they are with us in spirit. And the pupil of the eye, the Black brothers and sisters that we have, carry that power and that heritage, and and that leadership that will bring us to the next phase in the unfolding of our great destiny as a nation.
Will you also speak to the history of the Statue of Liberty?
In the next, you're moving to, yes, I will. Is that next? Yes. So these two other pieces, when I painted that first piece, actually faith was a part of that journey, because it was after the murder of George Floyd, and my heart was aching. I live in Portland, Oregon, which is a predominantly white area. Many of you probably saw in the news what was happening here with the protests, mostly white people, which contrary to the way that it was nationally reported, because I had the privilege of actually being there for some of it and bringing my artwork and doing an installation. This was a groundswell of the white population standing up for truth and justice for their Black brothers and sisters. And so this image, I wanted to do something and I just didn't know what to do. I'm, obviously present as a white, white person. And I felt like maybe this wasn't my area to, who am I to actually even speak or say anything? But I couldn't not do something. And so these images began coming to me, and I just tried to express how I felt in paint. And I started painting that painting I just showed you, and Faith saw it and said, I'm so glad that you are telling the truth about the Statue of Liberty. And I said, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, you have to, like, this is a thing. And she and Dr. Joy DeGruy were visiting the Statue of Liberty. And Dr. DeGruy actually was instrumental in getting the national parks to acknowledge the true history of the Statue of Liberty. So Faith, if you'll go to the next slide. These two pieces came as a way to kind of retell that story. So the Statue of Liberty was intended to be a gift from France to America to mark the end of slavery. That is an established fact that has been obscured. And the narrative of migration and Ellis Island was actually added many years after the statue was erected. The statue was to have broken chains so there was going to be the torch in one hand and broken chains in the other hand to symbolize that emancipation. And as in everything else having to do with this history, it was obscured and covered over and forgotten. And so the piece on the left here is called Juneteenth, and it marks, taking those words that we are made to say in school, liberty and justice for all, and defining what that means, telling the truth about the Statue of Liberty. And the date that is in Lady Liberty's hands is June 19th, 1865, the date that some of the last of the slaves in Galveston, Texas were finally freed 2 years after they were emancipated. And it is the date that the African-American community has embraced as that marker of the end of slavery, and is now a national marked day. And the piece on the left is called Liberty Leading the People. It is inspired by the Delacroix painting of the French Revolution. Here, Lady Liberty, holding chains, is carrying an American flag. I'm not sure on your screen how well it comes through, but in both of these, she is a Black Lady Liberty. And here she stands at the proverbial mountaintop. As Dr. King said, I see the promised land. She sees the promised land, and she is leading our nation forward to its future. Behind her are the words from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. And with this slight change, that Black lives matter, that they were endowed by their creator with unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that to secure these rights, governments were instituted among men. And so you can see these, taking the vision of our country, embracing it, and then saying, how do we actually get there? What would it take for us to live up to these ideals? Thank you for.
She looks like the woman who recited her poetry, doesn't she? Look at her.
I am just so incredibly moved by your artwork, Aria. Thank you so much for your contribution. I want to share with people that if you want to really get a true understanding of the history, especially when it comes to what has happened within the history of the African American community, I really highly recommend, if you were to only read one book, I would highly recommend you read Dr. Joy DeGruy's book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injury and Healing. And it's an incredible walk through history to understand our past, the psychological impact that it's had, and how it is that we move forward and heal. So please, I'll put in the chat towards the end of our talk here today, a link to purchase that book, but I highly recommend reading that book because it will really help you understand our nation. So it's hard to go through this conversation of historical trauma. And one of the reasons why I feel like it's so important to do is because of how all of us are impacted by historical trauma. And in the 1990s, the state of California did a study with Kaiser Permanente where they took 17,000 people and asked them to answer these 10 questions. And for each time you have a 1 next to any one of these things, that's your ACE score. It stands for Adverse Childhood Effects. So if you were physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, if you were physically or emotionally neglected, if there was divorce or separation in your household, was there domestic violence in the home? I would also say, was there domestic violence in the town or the city that you lived in, especially if you were a person of color? Were there parents that used drugs or alcohol? Was there a parent that was incarcerated? Or was there a parent that was mentally ill? So if you take a look at the historical trauma that we've just taken you through regarding the Lakota Nation and other indigenous communities here on this country, looking at the African American community, would you say that probably their score as a community would be pretty high as far as adverse childhood effects? Well, what has happened with this study of 17,000 people? The results was astounding. If you look at these 17,000 people, anyone who had 4 or more on that scale, 70% of those people were addicted to drugs and alcohol.
And 30% of those people developed illnesses that were life-threatening and took a minimum of 20 to 30 years off of their lives. Can you understand, by looking at this, how intergenerationally we have some work to do and some healing? And it's only in us coming together and understanding this history and the psychological, emotional, and even physical ways that it impacts us today that we can understand how to heal and move forward. When we look at adverse childhood experiences, we see depression, emotional and sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, substance abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, incarceration, mental illness. These are all the leaves on the tree, if you will, right? But then when we look at the roots, it creates poverty, it creates discrimination, lack of opportunity and economic mobility, poor housing and inequality and violence in our communities. So we have the ability, even though we've gone over all the historical, not all, a very small piece, but a broad brushstroke of these issues that face and plague our communities today. But the thing is once we understand trauma, science is really exciting today. We were talking about NASA taking a picture from space, right? And the Black Hills being the heart, looking like a human heart and being the heart of this nation. And one of the incredible experiences that I've come across over the last few years has to do with the way that science and epigenetics is addressing how we heal. And the interesting thing is that if you were to take my blood and look at my DNA, if I have historical trauma in my DNA as a marker, once I have healed that trauma and you take my blood again and look at it, that trauma marker is gone. So we have the ability to change the tide. We have the ability to do what Crazy Horse talked about coming back to center and seeing the light in each other. So these are the reasons to know the historical piece that talks about where Baha'u'llah said that justice is the most beloved of all things in my sight, and that justice, the purpose of justice is the appearance of unity, that we have to understand these things and deal with these issues so that we can move forward into unity. I want to pass this over to Laura and talk about our kinship piece and healing.
Okay, so the underlying principles of Lakota worldview. It is true that many of the Lakota people of our Indian nations in the past 150 years have been schooled away from their ancient values of fortitude, respect, wisdom, generosity, and toward the white society's primary values of individualism. Want to help me with that word, Faith? Acquisitiveness and materialism. Native peoples are renewing the innate capacity to dream and are rediscovering the essential spirituality that all humans share. It is important that the ancient Lakota values that support all of humanity's essential sacredness be understood in order to support the three primary principles of Midakyase. The first underlying principle of the Lakota worldview that establishes a strong foundation for seeing children as sacred beings, and which every child learns and relearns throughout his life, is the healing concept of Midakwe Oyasin. The Lakota word means we are all related, kinship with all creatures above, below, and in the water is a living principle that gives the Lakota a feeling of safety in the world, as well as feeling a reverence for all life, a sense of purpose for all things in the scheme of existence with equal importance to all, and abiding love. This concept of life and relations fills the Lakota with joy and mystery of life. As Standing Bear puts it, the Lakota could not despise any creature because all are of one blood, made by the same hand, and filled with the essence of the great mystery. So just to talk a little bit more about Mitakuye Oyasi, it means that we are all related. And I really believe that our ancestors taught us this so that we would be able to use this in the 21st century and to be able to carry out, that belief of that we are all related. The more you study and can understand that concept that life is energy, everything is energy, and we are all related, you'll understand that everything is relationships. The relationships that we have with our family, the relationships that we have with our community, just wherever we go in the world. Also the relationship that we have with the earth. We know that we don't litter. We know we need to take care of Mother Earth. We do believe that we are, that everything has a spirit, the trees, everything that is living. And that's with the animals, the trees, but we also have a relationship to food. And to exercise, and to how we are going to continue these relationships, not only with each other, but with the world, so that we can continue on. And the importance of Mitakuye Oyase is for our resiliency to still be here, to, be here to the end of time, as long as the earth is here. Our people said that we will be resilient. And I believe that understanding the relationships that we need to hang on to is one of the most important things. Like I said earlier, that one was to obey kinship rules and one must be a good relative. So what does that mean, to be a good relative? I really believe that means, to practice our Lakota virtues as well as all of our virtues. And that's why we are here today, is so that we can share those things. They're not just Lakota virtues. They're not just Lakota values. These are things for humanity to practice daily. Just to share a little bit of history about the White Buffalo Calf woman, that is when she brought us the peace pipe at the beginning of time. And she said, live your life by these values and you will live a good life. And these values are respect, generosity, courage, the values that we need to practice daily. So whenever we can practice those values daily, then, we can be a good relative, and we can understand the importance of how we are all connected. So I really believe that not only as a Lakota nation do we need to heal from the things and the traumas from the previous slide that Faith shared. We need to heal from those traumas as a family, but as an individual, and then as a family, and then a community. And then that's not where we stop. And, I feel like when we can heal those things, and then we can heal out into the world too. I love this picture that's up on the slide now, like with all the different colors. I do feel that, I am very honored to be a First Nations people and to have, grown up with the Sundance and the Sundance ways, and to just not only learn about who I am, but just to live it. And I feel like, it's a part of my destiny is to be here to help talk to the world, and to connect with the world, and to help people understand that we are all related and we don't have to live in fear of each other's cultures. We don't have to live in fear of, the healing and the impact of the traumas. So I'll end right there because there's so much to talk about when it comes to things like this. But I feel like, I've done I've done some work with Dr. Joe Dispenza and the science, and it really connects the Lakota worldview of what it means just to be a common human being. The word is ikje wichasha, a common man, or ikje wia. So that's just like, I am nothing. I'm just a human being. It's being so humble that you use only what you need. You only take what you need. You're not wasting. There's so many values that come along with that. And as I study Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, his science really helps us to understand, bringing that science and that spirituality together to give you the answers to the spirituality. So it's not, so you have a knowing, and you have a love for everybody. So I'll end on my part with was there anything else, Faith, that you wanted me to cover?
No, that's good. I mean, anything else you'd like to share is very important. So we're here for whatever you have to share with us. Your knowledge is important to the whole.
Okay. Well, growing up on the reservations, I'll speak a little about that. Yeah, the treaters were broken. We were promised education and healthcare and what else? The food, but it's the poorest of education. It's the poorest of healthcare, and it's the worst of food. So as being a part of the grassroots movement and knowing that I have to not only heal myself of the traumas that I grew up with as a child, living in probably every single one of those traumas that were around that tree, plus additional traumas as an adult with failed relationships and abuse and different things. I've been pushed to my limits to have to indulge in this work so that I could heal myself, because I have 3 children that I know that I have to heal for. So knowing that we can do more, and that we're all amazing people, and that we can do anything that we put our mind to, that wasn't my end goal, was to, I'm still healing myself, but I'm also helping the community. And I understand that the more you can help people, the more you can heal people, then you get that healing back, and then you could do more, and then you can go out into the world. I feel like if I haven't done this work, I wouldn't be on here, not even a year ago. So the work is fast as long as we continue to love ourselves and do the work every day. And, along with that comes trust. You have to learn how, and you don't get to that trust until you start to heal these things. And I just know that I want that not only for myself or my family or my community, but as a nation. We've had so many things taken from us. And then we go to the Black Hills and we see how the non-native people are profiting off of the Black Hills, profiting off of our language and our culture even. Those things start to come up of resentment and anger and stuff. But, I know that when I know the science about those vibrations, you can catch them right away. And then you can, say change. And then I have to teach people that's how we change. We have to stay in our higher levels of vibration with love and unity. And I'm still trying to figure out how exactly to do that. But creating spaces like this, I feel like, I'm able to share this story and put it out there in the world. And hopefully, people can understand that and understand the reality of the history. It's not just something that we're talking about. And I know a lot of people say it already happened. We're here now and we've got to think about the future. But the reality is we need to know the truth. We need to be authentic. And then we need to work on healing that and being open and building those relationships with each other so that we can help each other.
Thank you, Laura. The three of us, Laura, myself, and Aria, were 3 of 5 women who attended a week-long Dr. Joe Dispenza event. And we are all learning from one another how it is that the science and spirituality mend together, and how science is proving how scientifically it is being proven everything that spiritually I grew up believing as a Baha'i. And it is very exciting to be on a path with this powerful community of women doing this work and healing our nation. There's 3 quotes that we would like to end with that talk to all of that. Laura spoke very eloquently about Mitakwi Owasin, sorry, the N is silent. Please, Laura, help me one last time.
Midakuye Oyasin.
Thank you. And these words from Baha'u'llah: O children of men, know ye not why we created you from the same dust, that no one should exalt himself over the other. Ponder at all times in your hearts how ye were created. Since we have created you all from the same substance, it is incumbent upon you to be even as one soul, to walk with the same feet, eat with the same mouth, and dwell in the same land. That from your inmost being, by your deeds and actions, the signs of oneness and the essence of detachment may be made manifest. I've read this quote hundreds of times in my life. And after speaking with Laura yesterday and preparing for today, I read this quote with brand new eyes. And Laura talked about the interconnectedness of all. And we talked yesterday about even how we're related to the rocks and the trees and the universe, and how when we see each other as family, when we truly believe that we are all related, how we change. And when we change, the world changes. Abdu'l-Baha said, "This limitless universe is like the human body." I'm sorry, I have stuff covering. All the members of which are connected and linked with one another with the greatest strength. How much the organs, the members and parts of the body of man are intermingled and connected for mutual aid and help, and how much more they influence one another. In the same way, the parts of this infinite universe have their members and elements connected with one another and influence one another spiritually and materially. And then finally, Laura was talking about how we change. And Abdu'l-Baha told us what we had to do. He said, I charge you all that each one of you concentrate all the thoughts of your heart on love and unity. When a thought of war comes, oppose it by a stronger thought of peace. A thought of hatred must be destroyed by a more powerful thought of love. Thoughts of war bring destruction to all harmony, well-being, restfulness, and content. Thoughts of love are constructive of brotherhood, peace, friendship, and happiness. Laura, would you share Sitting Bull's quote and we'll close out for questions and answers?
Sure. Okay. Warriors are not what you think of as warriors. The warrior is not someone who fights, for no one has the right to take another life. The warrior for us is the one who sacrifices himself for the good of others. His task is to take care of the elderly, the defenseless, those who cannot provide for themselves, and above all, the children, the future of humanity. Sitting Bull.
And finally, Laura and I are working on with a nonprofit organization that was founded by Peter and Pete Ketches in 1989 called Ochetiwakan. And they have developed a 7-year curriculum for students to understand that we all have 4 bodies within us: the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, and the mental bodies. And if we were to train ourselves and educate ourselves to heal and feed each of these 4 bodies, then we can learn to have a healthy whole body approach to health and wellness. And Laura has dedicated her life to this work of teaching not only the Lakota spiritual values, but also the language. And, you know, the language is so important. You know, there's no way to lie if you're speaking in Lakota. You know, there's no mean words. So these are all the kinds of things that are so important for us to learn as far as coming together. And with that, we would like to close out and open up to any questions. Thank you so much for your time today.
So there are so many of us here today that I can't actually see all of you on one screen, which means that raising your hand is probably not going to do us a lot of good. So I'm afraid let's see if we can just speak out if you have a question, and hopefully we won't talk over one another too much.
I think there's if you go to participants, is there a way for them to raise their hand option?
There is, but I can't see all the list of participants at one time either. So it's still going to be a little difficult, but I'll keep my eye open.
Friends, okay. Friends, I really like the talk that was giving. I see you said that the Lakota means we are all related and we are all one family. And that's the teachings for today, because these are the teachings of Baha'u'llah. And it also says the science and religion goes together, it goes hand in hand. And if we could pray, read the readings and writings, it would make a difference. So thank you all for educating me on the history of the Lakota people. I enjoy the talk. Thank you all so much.
I have a question. I'm sure I'm going to do a lot of research after I leave here about a lot of the things y'all talked about. The thing that, is there a test you can see about the childhood? You said the marker, I believe. They can actually find that in your blood?
Yeah. There is you'd have to research epigenetics and historical trauma. But
epigenetics, okay.
Genetics and historical trauma, you'll be able to read up on that.
Okay, thank you.
Faith, this is Barbara. I just want to say that how in gratitude I am that I get to live long enough to watch all of you that are the age of my grandchildren come into your own, and to watch the incredible brilliance and changes that you're all accomplishing. Wopila.
Barbara is one of our elders. She studied under Lakota medicine men, and she is one of our teachers. So thank you, Barbara. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Barbara.
I just have a quick question. Oof, very moved and a very powerful talk. I guess the question I have is, how do we balance between the history, present, and the future? On one hand, we need to face the history, acknowledge the past, but how can we do it without making the current other feel guilty or blame themselves, or kind of feeling being blamed? So I guess that's the struggle. Like, how do we teach our children about that? Thank you.
I could answer a little piece of that. That's a excellent question. It's a question that I even ask myself. My mom is, non-native. She's white from the East Coast. My stepmom, she has a huge impact in my life. I have a lot of non-native people that have actually have helped me in this work, and to help me see, I guess, the gift in me when I didn't see the gift in myself. So maybe that could be a way, that you help the Native nations or the Black community, because it's hard. I guess with the trauma, it maybe calluses that gift that you have, and it just takes everyone around you to help soften that, so that you can see that within yourself, and then you can start believing it. And I feel like it has been the non-native community around me that has been able to help me see that. And I really hope that I can share that gratitude back to the people that have helped me see that. So that, and then the way that I feel that I'm giving back is by teaching what my ancestors have taught. And that is that we are all related, to help keep that unity, so that there isn't the blame, today, and just to spread the knowledge and the awareness of what we have been through, and the reality of the healing that needs to take place, and that we're all here now, and to be in the moment, be in the present moment, so that we can all heal and to help each other too. So I hope that answers a little bit of that.
Thank you very much.
Well, everyone, I'm sorry to have to jump in, but We do have an assembly meeting that we're using the same Zoom room coming up, so we're going to need to wrap up. And before we do our final little bit, Gwen has asked if she could read a prayer for humanity to help us conclude this very moving and important talk. So Gwen, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. And Rhea, Laura, and Faith, I've read this prayer many times, but for some reason this has more meaning now. Oh, thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, conferrest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite us. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou our hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving. Thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Thank you, Abdul Baha.
And thank you, Gwen. So before we close, let me give you a few quick announcements. Today's program has been recorded and posted to the YouTube channel entitled South DeKalb Baha'i Unity Center, where you can view it and invite others to view it as well. Barbara, do we know who's the speaker for next week yet? Well, we'll find out,
Yes,
and we'll make.
yes, it's dear sweet Hermione.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So we'll be seeing her next week, and we welcome you all to come back and contribute all of your thoughts and your energy and your prayers. We do have to announce that the food distribution program that has been going on at the Baha'i Unity Center will not be going on. It has stopped. And let's see, one moment. We also have an announcement about the Baha'i bookstore at the Unity Center. And so there are regular ongoing open hours for the bookstore. The next will be August 14th, 10 a.m. to noon, and they're normally weekly on Sunday mornings. However, you can also go online, see what the bookstore has, place an order, and then go to pick it up when it's open. And that way minimize your any physical contact, right? Maintain social distancing. The website is Baha'i-Unity-Center bookstore.square.site. And I will post that. I'll put that into the chat right now so everyone can see that. So there's the link in the chat if you would like that link. All right. For members of the Baha'i Faith, you are warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund, the Sandy Springs Baha'i Fund, or the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system at ocs.baha'i.us. Or you can mail a check to the Baha'i Unity Center at 2370 Wesley Chapel Road, Decatur, Georgia, 30035. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank our wonderful speakers. I want to thank everyone who read during the devotional and everyone who was here and participated in general. I especially want to thank Barbara Hennix who keeps us moving forward, the spiritual assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb and of Sandy Springs. And again, thanks to all of you for sharing part of your day with us. So I'm Stephen Boynton, and until next time, stay safe and well. We're going to end today with a closing prayer for the departed.
If I could say just before the prayer, if there's anyone who has burning questions or feels the need to continue, I put my email address in there. I would be happy to open a Zoom link and forward that to you. And also the websites for Ochitawakan and also the book I mentioned by Dr. Joy DeGruy is listed in the chats.
Thank you so much.
It's time to leave the spiritual assembly.
Hey, Doris.
If someone would like to read, they're most welcome to.
I'll read. I just had one of my best friends pass. Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. Abase not him who thou hast exalted through the power of thine everlasting sovereign, and remove not far from thee him whom thou hast caused to enter the tabernacle of thine eternity. Wilt thou cast away, O my God, him who thou hast overshadowed with thy lordship? And wilt thou turn away from thee, O my desire, him to whom thou hast been a refuge? Canst thou degrade him who thou hast uplifted, or forget him whom thou didst enable to remember thee? Glorified, immensely glorified art thou. Thou art he who from everlasting hath been the king of the entire creation and its prime mover, and thou wilt to everlasting remain the Lord of all created things and their ordiner. Glorified ordainer, glorified art thou, O my God. If thou ceasest to be merciful unto thy servants, who then will show mercy unto them? And if thou refusest to succor thy loved ones, who is there that can succor them? Glorified, immeasurably glorified art thou. Thou art adored in thy truth, and thee do we all verily worship. And thou art manifest in thy justice, and to thee do we all verily bear witness. Thou art in truth beloved in thy grace. No God is there but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting Baha'u'llah.
Thank you. Well, that's everything we have for today. Again, thank you everyone for coming, and we hope to see you all next week. Alawapa, and may you have a wonderful week.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you so much. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Faith, and everybody. It was wonderful. Absolutely.